Kia ora, everyone. It's really nice to see all of you. Thank you again for being part of Doc Edge Pitch. We're really looking forward to moving forward with your projects and making sure that we get the best pitch possible for our decision makers. And part of the process in doing that is actually all these series of workshops. And today we're going to look at the area of creating something that is going to be visually appealing in terms of a video presentation that you can actually create. So I wanted to just acknowledge the support of the New Zealand Film Commission and New Zealand Air in bringing this together. And I also like to welcome our special guests tonight. Arran Birchenough, who's the head of production at Getty Images. We have Dillaman and Rajneel Singh. It's all going to be conversational, but I think it's really important that when you have any questions or if you feel that you want to in some way contribute to the conversation, please feel free to raise your hand and then we'll get into the conversational part of this. But to start off with, guys, I think it's really key for us to start off with asking Arran Birchenough to start off. Arran, as I said, is director of production at Getty Images, and Getty Images is actually partnered with Doc Edge and a number of other documentary markets around the world where they are making available certain resources to help you if you are putting together a pitch trailer or teaser. I think it's really useful for Arran to explain what the partnership is and how that can help you, because you might want to use some of the archival resources that are out there to enhance the visual presentation that you have. So without further ado, I'll ask Arran to take over.
We just wanted to explain how we can assist you for free to try and provide you with some visuals that you can use through the pitch process should you want to, better illustrate your story. And also, while you're going through the process of putting the pitch together, if you are wondering whether content exists or archival content or stock content exists that would support your story, then you can lean on our free research service as well. But I was going to use Peter's pitch as an example because the content works quite well. So what we're going to do is we'll reach out to you if you haven't already got a Getty Images username and password. We will reach out to you and provide you one, and that username and password will allow you to download for free the high-res unwatermarked copy of any visual that you find on gettyimages.com, and you will have the rights to be able to use that within your pitch documents at no charge whatsoever. And there's no obligation that if you should go on and get greenlit and move ahead with production, there's no obligation to use the content that you've used within the pitch to license that from us. Hopefully, we obviously hope that we show you some content that will resonate with you and might be useful for the story. But just so you know, there's no obligations, right? So you can go ahead and pitch away, and the story might change, and that content might not be required anymore, and no problems whatsoever. We're happy to have supported you to get greenlit, and we'll take our chances that we'll have some content that might be relevant to your story. So any questions just regarding kind of any of that, what you have the rights to, and should be fairly straightforward, but just in case there's any questions.
I have a question. Yeah. Hi, I'm Kim Hegan.
Hey,
thank you very much for doing this. It's all really helpful. I've used you guys in the past for the last film we did. But I'm wondering whether we just use you for stills, and have you got a video library?
Yeah, we do. That's a great question, Kim. So you can see my screen, right, at the moment.
Yeah.
Essentially, I'll show you based on a search term of Afghanistan, right, for Peter's production. So essentially we bucket our content, if you can see at the top right-hand corner, into images and video.
Oh, yeah.
And within those buckets of content, we have what we call creative or stock, for a worse word, and editorial, which encapsulates our news, sport, entertainment, and archival coverage, right? So we will make all of this content available to you, because any of this content might be relevant for your pitch or for your production. So if I do a search under Afghanistan, and I'll show you some typical examples of the type of content you can expect. So primarily you probably want to use our video content. And so if I choose video, we have two types of content. And the line between these two types of content can be super thin in the way that documentary producers want to use it. But I'll talk to you generally about it. So we've got creative stock content, which can be released, model release content. Oh, that's flicked back onto still. So here we go, into video, and I'll look at creative content. And the creative content is typically people might not necessarily be identifiable, or it might be more travel related content, like this type of material here. It could even be released. This is actually model release content. So a filmmaker has got releases from these models in the content, or it might not need a release. Now, in this example, for Afghanistan, it is going to be a super thin line between news content and editorial content. But typically, our creative content is more likely to come in 4K and might serve as establishing shots because of the quality and because it might be released. Now, if I switch the search, and you can see here, so you know there's a filter panel on the left-hand side here, so you can put in your search of Afghanistan. It's telling me I've got a 5,500 or 5,700 video clips. If you are wanting a certain technique, might be a time lapse. You might want a stunning establishing shot, so you might be looking at the 4K content. You can click on this and see the entirety of the clip, and then there's a small storyboard down here. If you like what you see, you can have a look at that filmmakers clip, what else is in the series, or similar clips, right? So that's kind of the details on how you use it. But the idea is, with the filters, you can cut down from 5,700 immediate clips to a much more manageable list based on what you're essentially looking for. If I flick over to editorial content, so editorial content is news content shot by photojournalists. Typically, it's all shot in SD because our news partners are typically transmitting in SD content, and this material is related to news events. So the captions of the content will be based on a who, what, we want, where. Just click the audio down. What, where, when, why, caption. So where did it take place, when did it take place, who is in it, what is the date of it, etc. So that's typical news type content. And you can look at the main thing at the top of the filter is the newest content. You can look at the oldest content that we have, the most popular content, and in the news side, you can look, there's some filters for specific people who might be named within the content itself. Little tip here is that the fewer search terms you use, the greater the volume of content that you're going to get. If you use a very long string in the search term and any one of those words do not appear within the caption, you will exclude that content from your search. So if you type in, if you literally type of Afghanistan, Obama, and talks about, let's say, relief, right? You won't get any content whatsoever. If you then pull that back to Afghanistan and Obama, you get all the Obama clips, 317, not too many to look through, right? So essentially every time you put a keyword in and you're looking for our editorial content, you're excluding content from your search. So wider searches are better, and then pulling back down into them, if that makes sense. If you can't find what you're looking for from a from a video perspective, and remembering this is, it's a pitch, so a still might work with some movement across it to illustrate the story. Then you might find a still that illustrates that story for this particular process. And then typically we have more stills than video because we've been photojournalists longer than we've been videographers, and every day we create more still content than we do video content because of the weight of it, if you like. With stills content, you can view our content by either images or by the events, and the events state how many images are behind each of the events. And then you can, you've got a range of filters here from last 12 months, but nothing from Afghanistan and Obama from the last 12 months, so it's not surprising, so I can pull that filter back, etc. So you can kind of toggle around looking for different content. You can put in certain dates. Often for documentaries, you'll be looking for certain events around certain dates, so you can pull into those specific dates. You can also view the content with these large tiles, which got a little bit of information relating to the events within. So where's a good example here? Let's go for this one here. Or I can click on this view over here that changes the tile view to a small tile, but more information relating to the event underneath it. If you want to see everything, you just hang your cursor over the top of it and it will reveal all the information relating to that event, or you can click on it and see a full caption relating to that event, which is the photographer, which is the agency we took it from, etc., etc. And then it's really easy to download the content. There is what's called this easy access comp button, which is displayed here. If you're looking at it from this particular view, when you hang out your cursor over the top of the content, it's here. You simply click on that. You typically want to choose the largest one. This T's and C's here are saying the rights that you have is to use it for a comp. Right? This is not a license for you to license this content within a production. We're giving you the rights to use it within a pitch document. It also says that, things happen in our world. We, for various reasons, content flows both onto our site, but sometimes off our site. So there is a warning that basically within the license is that there's no guarantees that that content might be there when you come back to license it in 6 months' time or a year's time. but we do our best to inform our clients that if something has to leave our site for one reason or another, and there's multiple reasons why imagery might flow off our site, a contributor might leave us, there might be a kill notice from an event relating to that imagery, a photographer might pass, their family might want it removed, etc., etc. Then we do our best to let you know that that content will be leaving our site at a particular time, and you have a window of opportunity to license it. But we're just giving you a bit of a warning in terms of you know, things do happen in our world once content is being downloaded. But then you just click download comp here, select where you want the content to go, and you download that set. And the good news is under your own setup, you'll be able to go and see all the content that you've downloaded from us. We will help track it for you. So when you do want to come back, if once you get green lit and pick up, you know, your picture's successful, you can come back and find a record of everything that you've downloaded should you have changed the file name in the download process. The only other useful feature that is typically used is we have a feature called boards, and boards are a place where you can save content up that you like when you're going through your search, but you're not ready to download it yet. So I'm going back to video content, and I am looking at the most popular content that we have of Afghanistan. I'm going to look at some creative content for an establishing clip, and I like this one here. So I can click on this plus save button. I've already created a board for this project, but at this point I can go ahead and save to a new board called Doc Pitch Demo, and click save, and that item is saved to that board. And then I can just hover over any items that I like, save them in there. I want to have a look at some editorial content now that tells the story. So I'm going to save that one and that one. Actually, I want some stills as well. So I'm going to save, okay, I'm looking at that as an event, but I like that image. So I'm going to go into it and find that image, and I'm going to save that. If I'm looking at the details of the image here, I also get the save button up here. And then what I can do is have a look either in this prompt here, or go up to my boards and have a look at the boards I've created. And there's all the items that I've saved. And from here, you can do everything that you think you probably want to be able to do. If you want to share this with your director or your producer, you can send them a link that they can collaborate with. So if they've got a Getty Images username and password, they can add to it, remove to it, make comments against that board. If you don't want them to be able to collaborate, but you want to share the content, there's also an option here where they can view only the board. And then from here, you can make comments to a particular item. Open with this. Or you can make comments against the entirety of your board. All of these. Right, and anyone you collaborate with will be able to see those comments. You can also, if you can have an unlimited number of boards. So if you're thinking about your opening sequence or series, you can, and you've dropped a whole lot of content in, you can then select particular items from there, choose to move them to a board, create a board of pitch openers, and they will move from that board to your new board. And from here, I can select all the items in my board and choose to download all those assets in bulk via easy access as well. Just know that it'll probably time out at around 25 video assets at once, depending on the strength of your connection. But essentially, you should be able to, if there's anything that you think you might want to be able to do with this content, you can, including printing out them onto a sheet. If you're going into a meeting, it'll print the visuals out for you. Yeah, and that's pretty much the main part in terms of the pitch item, you know, the access to the visuals relating to the pitch. What I would say is you can also get an indication from us. We have 4 partners where we have access to their archives, but the entirety of their archives do not exist on gettyimages.com. And those partners are Television New Zealand, BBC, NBC, and ITN. So those 4 news networks, we have the rights to license the content that they create today and the content that they've created since their inception. But we have no intention of digitizing all of that material and making it available through gettyimages.com. However, if you're on the video page and you're on the editorial video page, you have at the bottom of your filter, you have the option to search online content. Online content means content that exists on gettyimages.com and a visual today that you can access, see, and download. Offline content means the content exists within the archives of the BBC or NBC or ITN. We don't have a plugin for Television New Zealand, so you can't tell via gettyimages.com what's in the Television New Zealand archives. You have to come to us and request that we ask Television New Zealand, and research is free. But for the other 3 archives, you can get an indication of if there's any material relating to your subject matter over and above what exists on gettyimages.com. And unsurprisingly, BBC is saying they have got over 10,000 items relating to Afghanistan and Obama. And what you can do is you can click on one of these items when logged in, and you can see information regarding that program. This was broadcast on the 27th of January in 2010. It's an interview with John Simpson, General Stanley, NATO commander of Afghanistan, etc. Now, from here, if you want to see a preview file relating to that item, you have to pay for a low-res preview file. And so it's not probably something that you might necessarily want to do for pitch, but you might be interested to know what is out there. And then if the pitch is successful, you might be wanting to gather in more archive content. And at that point, you can say, listen, we want to see a preview file relating to these items. There is a little hack with ITN. They don't have any, let's see. With ITN, any of their items that hold the word, and I'll type this up, called flash scan up here, that flash scan, after flash scan, it has a URL. And if you take that URL and drop it into a browser, it'll play the low-res version of that preview file for you without any cost or time in seeking a preview. We are on the cusp of offering a service via the BBC that will allow you to see any preview files that have been ordered globally in the last 7 years for free. We're not quite there yet. By the time you get through the pitch and later in the year, we hope to have the service available, which will rapidly open up the BBC archives to being removing us from having to, if you like, you coming to us to be able to do that, right? I mean, and what we would love to do is open up all these archives for you guys to be able to search without limitations, and then just be able to come to us from a licensing point of view. But from a technology point of view, we're just not able to support that with our partners quite yet. So, but we can offer you this for ITN, and from here you can see this particular version. Now, if this particular version worked for you, we wouldn't have a problem with you right-clicking and downloading it and using it within your pitch. And to that point, if your pitch does require material outside one of these, from one of these offline partners, like Television New Zealand, and you do need to see a preview file, and there's a small cost relating to getting that preview file, and you wanted to use that preview file within your pitch document, I think it's typically, it's typical practice to be using preview files which hold a watermark and the time codes on it within the preview, within pitch documents. That's, that's not unheard of. So we wouldn't look to charge you a fee to use it within a license fee to use it within the pitch document. There is a delivery fee that we on charge. So that's kind of it, really. Any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, there's one from Tony Sartorius. Tony.
Oh, hi everyone, Tony Sartorius here, and can I just note how sad it is that so many documentary filmmakers have nowhere else to be on a Friday night. Yay, us. Hey, Aaron, just a quick question. I wanted to talk about New Zealand content, which I assume means TVNZ on your archive. We already have...
Yeah.
We already have that. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, so Television New Zealand is one of our partners for local content. Getty Images has its own news division and our own news coverage, so we have our own material that sits on Getty Images. And then globally, we have about 100 video partners, any one of them that might be operating in New Zealand for news coverage. So Television New Zealand is the largest of our partners, but it's not our only partner in terms of, so I'll just do a search while we're talking away there, Tony, to give you an idea. But carry on. Yep.
To check, in respect of Television New Zealand material, if we have material that we've sourced, say, directly from TVNZ's own website of news coverage from, several years ago, I assume that the licensing offer that you're making here would apply to that without, I assume, the need for any other process, that we're okay to use that without any concerns. Is that correct?
Effectively, Getty Images manages the licensing of TVNZ clip content for production use, as opposed to the selling of their material long form. So we don't have any concern with you using, something that's sourced off Television New Zealand in a pitch document. We just give you a heads up that if you wanted to use that material within the final edit, that it would of course be subject to the approvals of Television New Zealand and any license fees payable at that.
Understand. Yeah. Just for my clarity, we can go ahead and use the things that we've pulled from TVNZ's website without any further process. We can just do it as it stands right now.
Yeah, we'd be the ones chasing, and we wouldn't chase.
Cool. Yeah, Thank you. So appreciate that.
Fine. And just a heads up, we have this all the time, as this program was on the BBC, so can we license this material from you? Not necessarily, because the BBC buy in content like any other production or producer. And so just because it's run on Television New Zealand or the BBC, it doesn't mean they own the copyright of that material. So if you really like something that you've seen on Television New Zealand, it might be obviously theirs, but if it includes any other third-party content in it, it could be material from another news agency, it could be AmCam footage, it could be sourced elsewhere. So therefore, when you go through the licensing process, then Television New Zealand at that point confirm whether it's their copyright or not. Yeah.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Because if not, I'd like to thank Arran, because we'll get on to the actual part of actually now utilizing the archives and some of the other footages you might have to actually making a compelling trailer. Anyone anywhere would like to ask any further questions? I know that Arran will make himself available, and if you have not received a link and a way to get in to be able to access that, let Belle know and she'll direct it to Arran so that Arran will be able to connect up with you.
Yeah, just on that, everyone, if you could, Belle has provided me everyone's contact details, and so we're just cross-referencing whether you're in our system or not. If you give us 3 or 4 days, if you haven't heard from us in 3 or 4 days, reach out to Belle, but I'll take some weight off Belle's email inbox, because we'll have a pretty good record of who we've set up and we can see whether you've logged in or not. So just give us, till the end of next week. We had a couple of short weeks and we're just getting on top of things. Yeah.
Thank you. If
Thanks.
that's And the other thing is that there were some comments about the fact that your voice was breaking up. So we're recording this, and for those of you who didn't actually get everything, we will make that available so you'll be able to follow through and just listen to it all over again. So thank you, Arran, and I hope that you're not going to be stuck for anything to do for the rest of the evening. You're more than welcome to sit back and listen to the rest of this, but totally understand if you wanted to get on and spend the evening with your kids and family and friends.
I will sit in for a while, Alex, but if dinner's served, you might see the last of me. Yeah.
Thank you, Arran. Thank you very much. Moving on to our next presenter, and we have invited Rajneel Singh to come. Rajneel made his directing debut with the 2003 fan short, The Fanimatrix. It was downloaded millions of times in the age before YouTube even existed. He followed it with Reservoir Dogs meets Fairy Tale Big Bad Wolves. And in 2010, his Blank Spaces was one of the 5 short films chosen for Tourism New Zealand's Your Big Break competition. Rajneel has many editing credits. This is Picky, Find Me a Maori Bride. He's directed on The Latter Show. He has helmed music videos and adverts represented by Mumbai's Genesis Films and is developing movie projects with longtime producing partner Craig Parks under the SPV Films banner. So welcome, Rajneel.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just want to start off by just saying thank you to Doc Edge for inviting me to speak. I'm a little bit, I have some trepidation because I've seen the list of the people who are attending, and I can tell that a lot of you guys are actually very experienced filmmakers. So I feel like I'm kind of like trying to tell people to suck eggs or something, which is not, it's not really my intention. And I wasn't too sure what to talk about because I figured that you guys are all quite very experienced already to begin with. So it's a little bit hard to sort of, try and come up with an agenda, but I thought maybe the easiest thing for me to do would be to kind of, I'm going to be speaking, then Doug Dillaman's going to be following me, and we both worked as editors. We've both cut a lot of pitch reels and trailers and teasers. We both have very different approaches, I think, which is great, because I think that's something that's really important, is that some of the stuff I talk about will just not ring true to any of you, and that's fine. It's totally cool. And it'll be great for someone like Doug to kind of sort of bring his approach and sort of talk about that. But I just thought easiest thing for me to do would be to just talk about my process for how I've done this stuff in the past. The questions that I kind of ask myself and the questions that I put towards my producers and directors, and kind of go, hey, look, this is what you want to think about when you're cutting, whether it's a 2-minute trailer or a 10-minute teaser. It's all they all kind of had this sort of the same kind of principles around them, and I'll just share that with you, and hopefully I'm not repeating things that you guys already know. If I do, I apologize. But anyway, so I guess I just want to start off by just saying that the way that so I've cut a few film trailers. I've cut a lot of pitch content that's gone out to different parts of the world for film and theater and television. I've also cut. I also had a. I was in the Doc Edge pitch competition. Was it 2 years ago, Alex? I think, or 3 years ago. Yeah, something like that. And so I've actually got that here as well to show you. So I've sort of been through this process myself, both as a director and as an editor. And the way that I always approach this stuff, always is for me is structure. I've found that there are some structural truths or guidelines that if you kind of follow, it can kind of help just get you a little bit faster to what you want to be working with, and get yourself away from all the footage you might have shot or the ideas you're exploring that kind of just get in the way of helping you sort of sell your story and tell your story to a room full of people who, you know, have been there for ages and they're tired and they're sleepy, and you're trying to sort of get them to hold attention. And so I always basically start on structure. And the thing I always say to myself, and I always say this to everyone else when it comes to cutting teasers, is that I feel that teasers are provocations. They're provocations to your audience. And what you're always provoking is an arousal of interest. You're basically trying to get them to sort of, you're trying to say whatever you can and do whatever you can to get them to pay attention. And you want to lay down a challenge, which is to, the challenge is for them to then want to watch your film. I know this is very, very obvious. Obviously, it's a teaser, but you want to tease, but it's always kind of good to say it out loud and to kind of remind yourself of that, because you get lost in the weeds, when you're sort of a week in or 2 weeks into this thing and you're just having the most ridiculous and mundane conversations about things about nothing to do with what you're trying to sell. Teasers are provocations, and you just want to provoke your audience to just be excited and be interested in what you're doing. And I always say the best provocation that you can, the best way to arouse interest, the best provocations to use is questions. You want your teaser to ask a question to your audience. And that question is that the desire to find an answer to that question, and the promise that the answer is going to be in your film, is the thing that will get them to commit to it, to be interested, to want to watch it. The best teasers always leave us with, these deeply intriguing unanswered questions, and they create a hunger within you to watch the film and find out what it's all about. That's number one. Like if you don't know what the question is that you're trying to ask in your teaser, then that's a problem, and that's probably the place where you want to start. And it's always simple. It's always a simple question. It's a basic one. When you're thinking about that, one of the best things you can always do is go back to your log line. Obviously, your log lines are a really good guide for what your film is about, and they can help you figure out what is the one question you want your teaser to plant in your audience's mind and make them give a shit. And in that regard, the other thing that I always say to everyone that I work with, and I always check with myself, is that teasers must be self-sustaining. Everything in your teaser basically should be supported by itself. Your teaser shouldn't have extra bits and pieces that have nothing to do method, actually, because if you can figure out what your question is and what your premise is, and you lay that down, any footage you've got there that's got nothing to do with those two things, they're out. You get rid of them. And that's really the other thing that I've always found is to be the make or break point between a good teaser and a bad one. You don't put things in your teaser that confuse or dilute your premise. And it's always better to kind of hold back anything that's complex, anything that's ambiguous, so that your premise, your idea, and that question you're answering is always fully understandable. And perhaps the most controversial thing that I've always found personally is that sometimes you kind of have to lie a little bit. Like you kind of have to sort of, because you're going back to your log line, and your log line is going to basically tell you exactly how simple, your teaser has to be as simple as your log line. And so anything else that you've got which explores more complex ideas in your film, and because it's a feature film, I'm assuming most of you guys are making feature films, and they are dense and they're layered and they've got all these different ideas exploring. If there's anything in there that helps you sell that simplicity of that premise, the simplicity of that question, and even if you have to kind of cheat the footage a little bit, I tend to go ahead and do it personally, because you don't want to introduce any extra ideas. But and if you've got great footage that helps you sell an idea that helps you sell the core idea of your teaser, but it's not directly tied into it, but somehow through editing, the magic of editing, you can kind of help, you can manipulate it and help support that. That's usually a better way to go, because every single bit of footage that you have that supports that simple idea, that simple question, it's just going to make your teaser feel very rich, and it's going to feel very it'll make you feel like that the person who's made this film is really going to explore something in a vibrant and very deep sort of way. And I find that that's always a good thing. So I'm often actually getting into argument with a lot of directors when they just like saying, oh, well, but that shot, of that thing has nothing to do with the teaser. But I can say to them, yes, in the documentary, it's something, it's a different topic, but in the teaser, it actually supports this thing. So let's just the teaser, because it's a pitch document. We're just pitching for the opportunity to make this film and to sell this film. Let's use it. And because at the end of the day, once the film's done, no one's going to care. So I always, and these are the weeds that I always get stuck in. When I'm deep into cutting teasers, is always basically sort of the line of being authentic to your footage versus being authentic to the idea that you're selling. It is always it's always a sales product. It's a sales document. It's whatever you can do to get the sale. I feel personally, from my experience as an editor, you got to use it. And that also comes down to even the topic. So if you're it's a feature film, your film's gonna start in your first act. You're gonna be setting up your topic, but it's gonna evolve. But sometimes where your film evolves to is not important for selling your film. The initial idea and the simple question and the front half of your film is where everything is actually quite important. So again, you might just kind of go, okay, cool, yes, our documentary started off as an exploration about pollution in Bangkok, but it actually turns into this personal story later on about a woman who ends up sort of living in the dump. But if what that documentary turns into isn't actually exciting, then you kind of have to basically double down on the most exciting bit, which might be the woman, or it might be the issue of pollution, but it might not be both, especially because if you're asking and exploring ambiguous ideas that don't come across very clearly, sometimes you have to pick and choose. And being ready to pick and choose, especially if you've got a good editor on board who's actually really helping you out with that, is it's important, and it's a really good skill to use, and it gets easier with time. Again, I'm sure you guys already know all this, but it's good to say it out loud, I guess, together. Go through the process together. And so for me, going back to the structure of a teaser, I always say that a good teaser does three things. Number one is that it explains very, very clearly and concisely your premise. Your premise is not the whole story. Your premise doesn't have to be, your premise doesn't even necessarily have to be the full log line. Your premise is just the most simplest, the simplest, most boiled down idea about what makes your documentary and your point of view interesting. So it's always refining it down, and that's your teaser has to explain that clearly and concisely, whether it's a 2-minute trailer or a 10-minute preview or whatever. The second thing that it does is that it asks that one simple question. It asks you a question of, and that Often the question is related to the major theme, but it doesn't have to be. And I'll show you some examples of the stuff that I've done, which kind of sort of essentially does that. And the third thing that all good teasers do is that they paint a very clear picture of the tone of your film. And what you're promising the experience of the film is going to be. So it's always it's always premise, question, and tone. And often, if you watch a lot of trailers, often if you watch a lot of teasers, even long ones, you'll actually find that they can often fall into a 3-act structure of how they actually play out. So it's like the first third of your teaser tends to be introducing your premise. The second third of your teaser tends to be where you actually ask the question, and the third, the third act of your teaser, the last third, tends to be this big blown out climax where you just kind of really paint a picture of the tone. Is it uplifting? Is it serious? Is it depressing? Whatever it's going to be. And they always kind of fall into, I've always found for everything that I've cut, they tend to fall into that rough structure. And if you can kind of sort of keep that in mind as you're trying to figure out what you want to put into it and how you're going to say it, that those ideas of those 3 elements and potentially that as a structure that can get you very, very far. It might not give you the teaser that you're going to go with at the end of the day, but it'll get you building it and getting a good idea of how you can evolve it from there. And sorry, I'm just going to check my notes. Right. And then really once you've got that structure down, I've always found that everything that I cut, and this is my own terminology, this is not shared by anyone else, but I always kind of find that the teasers that I always cut together, or trailers, tend to fall into like two broad general categories. I call them either premise trailers or teasers, like a premise teaser and an experiential teaser. And there's only just one fundamental difference. The premise teasers point what a film is trying to sort of angle its sales angle on is the topic, the hook, basically kind of giving you a big picture of, we're gonna we're going to do a documentary on the life cycle of the praying mantis from Madagascar. That's it, and it just gives you everything up front, but with the promise of it's going to get deeper, it's going to get more interesting. There's going to be a lot of evolutions and stuff like that, and that's a premise teaser. Experiential teaser is the other type, which is it's where it does, like all teasers, they do tell you what it's about, but they really focus on the ride. The tone, the emotions, it's really trying to sell you on what kind of ride you're in and how good it's going to be. And I've always found that whether you're doing a premise teaser or an experiential teaser, it comes down to, a lot of the times it comes down to what footage you've got. If you've shot a lot of stuff, you might be able to do a premise teaser. Or if you haven't shot a lot of things, you can do an experiential teaser. Or if you've already shot an amazing documentary, but you only have there's this one sequence that's just going to basically, it's going to sell your film. So you just want to just show that as part of your teaser, and that's your teaser. It's just this one sequence that blows your mind. And you're like, oh, wow, if the rest of the film's like that, I'll watch anything like that. So it comes down a lot to what you've already shot, what you've got, and also I guess really how other people who've seen your footage or have seen your ideas and read your pitches, what they think is going to interest them. So these are decisions you have to make as directors and producers, which you obviously know that. But yeah, it's those two kinds of categories that I find most things fall into. And once you kind of know which one is going to be your best foot forward as a sales asset or pitch asset, then you can kind of sort of explore into those directions. I think I'll play the first trailer that I've got here, Belle. If you can cue that up. So this is my pitch teaser for that I did for Doc Edge in 2020, I think, for a project that we did called Operation Rambo. I think the best thing to do is to just play it out first, and then I can talk a little bit about it after that. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Between 1986 and 1998, Peter O'Brien kicked ass as a star of 8 Indonesian action movies. I'll kill you! He abruptly vanished from the world of cinema, only to re-emerge 20 years later in the sleepy town of Tauranga, New Zealand. Can Peter O'Brien make his comeback to the world he walked away from decades ago?
Hi, I'm Steve Austin, cult movie fanatic and the director of Operation Rambo.
I have broad and eclectic taste, from highbrow cinema to midnight cult movies. I have an extra special interest in obscure cinema at the extremes of taste, class, and style. After I started dipping and that's how I was introduced to the films of Peter O'Brien, the Indonesian Rambo.
When I discovered the star of some of my favourite cult Indonesian action movies was alive and well and living just 2 hours away from me, I got very excited.
We were on a world trip. Indonesia was the second country that we had arrived at. I was about to head off to find food, and the reception guy he says to me, "Where are you going? Film people have been looking for you. They actually think that you're still on. We want to introduce you to Ram Punjabi. Would you please come with us?" And we enter into a very wealthy complex. Ram comes out. And then he asked me all about acting. "Have you done any acting? Can you fight?" "Yes, I can fight." So they said, "Look, you're going to be our Indonesian Rambo."
You can find me around here. The name is Rambo. This is the end of your dirty game, you swine.
So who is the real Peter O'Brien?
My real name is Peter John Wilson. The stage name is Peter O'Brien. Producers felt that we should change our names because of our criminal past. Have you been in prison? Yes, I have.
So it turns out Peter had been in some pretty high security prisons in the past for some violent and unsavory crimes. Is there more to this guy than meets the eye?
I found myself serving a 6.5-year sentence. I met Craig in prison and we became good friends.
So these two Kiwi jail buddies ended up in the same obscure action films together. You couldn't make this shit up.
Loved the action, did all my own stunts. Yeah, I could have been killed. I could have died easy, just like. Really pushed myself to the limit physically. I didn't get a chance to really show my acting skills in a drama-based arena.
10 o'clock, okay? Okay. Huh? I psyched you out.
I ended up spending 22 years of my life in Indonesia.
So why did he leave?
When I came to know God was when my mum died.
A miracle occurred involving drunken soccer players, a plane turning around, and Peter meeting God in Sydney Airport.
Be real. Being a Christian and being a movie star wouldn't work. But now I'm back and I really want to do some more. The best of my acting is yet to come.
And I've decided I'm going to step in front of the camera to help Peter O'Brien return to the world of movies. We're going to talk to others who have been through similar journeys. Put him through an action movie boot camp.
Talking to me?
We're going to look for Craig.
You have been looking for me, right?
And even try to bring Peter face to face with Stallone himself.
I've got one last good fight in me.
Operation Rambo is a feature documentary about the greatest action hero you've probably never heard of. Can he make a comeback from obscurity to redeem his past and make a return to the silver screen? It's going to be a tongue-in-cheek, heartwarming look into one man's frankly ridiculous life story and his touching journey of redemption.
Whether you're a cult cinema fan like me or just love a great yarn, Peter O'Brien's story is one of the great unsung tales of a Kiwi battler living large on the world stage.
Hey, Pete, I hope you're sitting down because I've got some exciting news for you.
Cool. Yeah, so that was our Doc Edge pitch for Operation Rambo. And what that was actually, we had cobbled that together from a whole bunch of different things. Obviously, we had made a short film version of our documentary the previous year for Loading Docs. And there's a lot of content that we could pull from that. Obviously, the guy being a movie star, there was also a lot of other content from his movies and clips from the parts of the world. We did use some Getty stock images from the 1980s for Indonesia. We also used all kinds of sort of sources from films, from different movies, from cult movies, B movies, and so forth. And what we had done was we'd cut that with our boosted campaign for fundraising to film the short film, which is where all the footage of Steve, my co-director and the protagonist of our feature documentary, of him sitting in his living room and giving the introduction. And then we just found out that between those two sources of footage, all we had to do was just write some VO that linked them together, and that was enough to essentially communicate the entirety of what Operation Rambo was going to be about. So, in my experience of how I would classify that, I would always say that's very much a premise teaser. We're just info dumping a lot about the context of what the documentary is about, where we're going to take it to, and essentially, asking that very simple question. So for us, when we made different, we initially had like an 8-minute version, and then we sent it to Alex, and he gave us his feedback, and we had feedback from other people, and we cut it down. And what it boiled down to for us was that the premise for Operation Rambo, our teaser, was the greatest Kiwi action hero you've never heard of. The question that we wanted to leave with the audience, hopefully, was, is Peter going to make his comeback? Which is what the documentary is about, is that we're going to basically tell his life story whilst showing his attempts to become an actor again. And the tone is clearly whimsical, quirky, yet heartfelt. And in that 3-act structure, it was very much, Act 1 was set up the premise. Act 2 was actually setting up the tone, that it's very silly and weird and funny and quirky. And then we actually put the question in Act 3, which was basically introducing the idea of what it was going to be about. And that is essentially how we had assembled that teaser. That was kind of our approach for that. The other one I want to show you is I just want to sort of explore this idea of the experiential teaser. And so I've got something. This is not for Doc Edge. It's a pitch reel for a theater show that we had taken to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in 2014, I believe. And this was basically we just had some people turn up, and they just rolled during several different versions of the show, and I just had this big pile of footage. But the limitations that was put on me for this pitch reel, because they were trying to sell it on to getting it being performed in London, was that we couldn't explain the plot. The plot was top secret. The story was top secret. So we were like, well, how the hell do we sell this thing? And so again, it boiled down to those 3 elements, which was premise, question, and tone. So what was the premise? The premise that we could say was it was an immersive zombie apocalypse experience. The question that we want to ask across that teaser is, can you as an audience member withstand seeing something this intense? And the tone we were going for was dark, scary, yet cathartic. And that's essentially was the guidelines that we had to assemble this thing. So let me just roll that one up for you really quickly.
Look, guys, tonight all our stunts are performed by professionals in a controlled environment, but I do have to warn you that there is live blank firing ammunition, there are explosives, there are much bigger explosives, there's blood, there's offensive language, there are scenes of horror, and there are definitely scenes of graphic violence. Tonight you will be manhandled, you will be talked to, you will be asked questions of. Please just go with the flow, you will not be harmed, okay? but I please have to ask you, no video photography or photography of any kind. At the end, you can grab a zombie and get a selfie. At the end,
Welcome to the Armed Rescue Coalition operating system.
6 months ago, the Z virus exploded out of Indonesia and made its way across the globe in less than 36 hours. We don't know where it came from. We don't know if there is a cure. And the global population has been cut by up to 82%. We lost all communication with this facility, and we assumed that it had been overrun by the infected until someone or something triggered a distress beacon from inside.
Emergency. Emergency. Arc beacon protocol activated 0817.
The fact is, we are being wiped out.
you're required to undergo a routine inspection. Cooperate or you will be ejected.
This facility sent out an emergency beacon. We got contact!
Alright, everyone, inside or close.
Now look around you. There are no infected here.
Who did it? Then fuck off! Open the door!
My business don't open the place.
I have to leave everything that is not out of the sound.
Shut up!
In this room should be a blood pressure monitor.
Where's the generator room for this place?
I need to find it.
We can use that ring phase to reboot the system, but we need to find the power room.
Check your airways. Make sure that they are clear.
Shut up and go with us! We need to do something now! Ready to reboot the system as soon as I get the power up.
What's your name? David. David, you stick to me like fucking glue. This ain't Call of Duty, motherfucker.
Maybe we have to let it run its course. Maybe extinction is the only way. Maybe extinction is now.
This is your lives on the line. If you think we risk it and go out there and get her, raise your hands now.
Yeah, so that was the trailer that we had cut together for this show called The Generation of Z. And yeah, it was very much a case of like, how do we sell this without actually going into the intricacies of the story? And the show itself actually has a lot of very in-depth themes about existentialism, climate change, humanity, pollution, that kind of stuff. Again, all that stuff in the initial idea when we were cutting it together, we had a version that had all those things in, and over the course of the 2 weeks that we were cutting this teaser whilst we were running the show, it all got thrown out. All of it got thrown out, and we were just like, no, what is the question we want to pitch to investors and audiences, which is, this is an intense experience. Can you survive it? And all that remained from the show was just aspects that sold that idea. Yeah, and that to me is kind of the experiential trailer, and it worked. We the show was picked up, it got put on London, and we used a lot of all that footage to get audiences to it, and it was a great time. So yeah, again, it's just that, what's the premise, what's the question, what's the tone? That's your three elements, and whether you're making a premise teaser or an experiential teaser, you can achieve anything you want pretty much, as long as you know those elements. The adage of keeping it simple stupid is the most important thing. If you can do that and make your film look amazing, I think you're always gonna basically get people paying attention. And that's it. I think that's all I got to say. I'm out of notes. So thank you for listening. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Yeah.
Thank you, Rajneel. I think that what I would suggest that we take a 10-minute break right now, and then Doug will come back and speak. And then after that, we'll have a conversation with a Q&A with any questions that there might be. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for still being here. Reiterating that the purpose of this particular session is to provide you with some hints and to talk about what makes a compelling trailer or a teaser. And we all know that a slick trailer is the ultimate marketing tool. You can talk and talk, but we are in the business of actually creating compelling content. And I think that when you're dealing with decision makers and any audiences, they want to be seduced by what it is that you're promising to tell, what it is that you're promising to make. And I think that it would be remiss of us if we would do any pitching that we don't have a teaser or a trailer that's going to be able to do that. Doug Dillaman is our next guest. I'm very pleased to be able to introduce Doug. Doug is someone that I've followed. He's a man of many different directions. For nearly 2 decades, Doug has edited award-winning documentary and reality television in New Zealand. He has done short films, dramas, and trailers, and helped to develop new projects. He's also a writer and a filmmaker. And his most recent short, you could have seen the Mona Lisa. It played at DocEdge 2021. But Doug's also a reviewer, and he has posted many reviews of different films over the years at all the different festivals and cinemas that are showing. So I'm really pleased to be able to welcome Doug Dillaman.
So part of the reason I'm here is because of a DocEdge pitch I worked on, but I'd actually like to start by showing a completely different teaser that I didn't work on at all, because it's a different approach as well. It's edited by Kushla Dillon, who's an amazing documentary editor, for a film that's crowdfunding right now, and hopefully I can get this to work. So this is for the King Loser documentary. For those of you in New Zealand familiar with the Flying Nun label, you'll know about King Loser. For those of you who don't, you are about to discover them, and let's see if this works.
Ladies and gentlemen,
that was coming through.
Present to you King Loser.
And who's your favorite band, Dave? King Loser. Duck.
We're in the studio with King Loser. Chris and Celia, welcome.
Hello.
Hello. You guys are sort of technically halfway through the comeback.
Actually, no, it's like comeback.
In 2016, we set up a tour. It was 3 weeks.
Alex, I don't think we can see we can't see it. It's not coming across the screen.
Okay.
Shut up, you don't start this off. The joke sticks to you.
It's like going to war, Andy. I think I've got PTSD.
Sorry, I'll just stop there. Is nobody seeing it?
Yeah. Kim said that she's seeing it.
No, I'm not seeing.
Box on the bottom.
Okay, well, I'll continue because it looks like it might be at different people's ends.
Enough that crowd can be able to see the immolation
the whole thing would just go up in flames. No one would be there to see us be wild and incompetent and fall the fuck apart.
Fucking pussies, I was whack lemon with a kid.
Hey, lady, you want to be in a rock and roll band?
Went round this beautiful Indian woman called Patrick.
It's probably going to look for a piece of ass. You know what these seamen are like.
And I hit it off immediately with these guys.
Yeah, it was kind of a rugged situation to be in the band. Well, that's one couple.
How many drummers do you think you had? 15? Because it was a bit stiff, a bit round. That band was a lot of things at once.
With the flying none out of once. I think you kicked down from your own band.
There's been a lot of gossip mongering inquiries as to the competence of various members. Fucked if I'm telling them so they can sit around gloating about my friends.
I'm not putting up this shit anymore, you're fired. You can do tonight, but that's it.
Sean and I got screened out a lot. That's testament to how deep those relationships run. Because you can't get half a foot away from someone and shout at the top of your lungs and be best friends with that person in the morning, unless you've got a very strong stake driven into it.
But I heard a young girl crying, the baby. But I heard a young girl crying,
You did it.
And goodbyes.
I don't know if it's wise to talk about it in terms of vibe.
Yeah.
Now there's no more morning dew. Now there's no more morning dew.
What they were saying all these years.
Cool. Let me just unshare that. Great. So one of the things that I think a lot of documentary filmmakers, joys of autoplay, that documentary filmmakers run into in sort of this phase of the process is a sense of intense frustration that you have the idea, you want to make the film, and now you have to make something that's not the film in order to make the film. And so my pitch today is to stop worrying and embrace the idea that this isn't just a means to an end of getting your project funded. And that's obviously very important. And building an audience, and that's very important. But I'd also like you to consider the idea of it being actually a chance to be a real creative crucible for your project, that you're challenging everything in it from the first premises. You're thinking of what sticks, what doesn't, and where this idea, no matter how vague or defined or what it is, really truly is, and what resonates about it with you and what will resonate with other people. The reason my work wound up at Doc Edge in 2021 was because in May 2020, during the middle of COVID, a talented filmmaker named Tom Burston, who, if you're from New Zealand, you'll undoubtedly be familiar with his documentary, This Way of Life. And if you're not, you may have seen his work as an award-winning director of photography on Netflix's Snowpiercer, Hell on Wheels, lots of other stuff. He's a big deal. And he wanted to make a personal documentary. And I said, well, tell me about it. And he said, well, my parents fled Poland at the onset of World War II and traveled around the world, wound up in Canada. I wound up in New Zealand. They wound up in New Zealand. And then 60 years later, my mom was going through some stuff and found the one bag that my dad took out of Poland all the way around the world, all the way to New Zealand. And it had a false bottom. And in that false bottom were pictures of his first love and love letters. And when she found this, she dropped the bag and tried to stab him with a kitchen knife. She was in her mid-80s, so it wasn't a challenging physical attack to stop. But and of course, the letters were in Polish. Tom didn't really know what was going on. He put them away, put the bag away. End of story. Parents die. And then one day he decides to get it out, and he actually starts looking at these things. And even without speaking it, reading the language, he can still see, you know, the nudes, he can see love hearts, he can see all these things. He gets them translated. And his dad, who I have watched plenty of video footage of and gives basically nothing, has written the most florid and deep felt love letters. And Tom wants to know, well, who really was my dad? But he's dead. That was basically Tom's pitch. It's like, okay, and so he's like, and so I need a trailer. I'm like, great, because the reason he called me is because I'd worked on cutting trailers for feature films. Some of you have been in the New Zealand industry might know James Brookman, who was another American who came over here. And I'm actually just going to throw his link in the chat over here. And if you get bored with me, go watch some of his trailers, because in particular, his trailer for the documentary American Movie is one of the best trailers I've ever seen. And I was pretty much starstruck when I met him for that reason. The only documentary trailer I cut with James was for Reign of the Children, which actually turns out to be a documentary not very different from, in some ways, in terms of it being a personal exploration, from Thomas's story, which was called Iggy in Love. Now, we had a few challenges. The first one was that Thomas was in Napier. The second one, of course, is that the film doesn't exist. So he sends me a hard drive. And this is where we get into this question of, and Raj, of course, in his presentation, I think, you know, you have often when you're in the project, you have your very clear idea of what the project is. But when you're working with an editor externally, that's your first chance to actually, apart from the producer or, you know, development people you brought on to that point, it's certainly the first time that you're really creating an audiovisual document, and you're discovering, like, you may have this great thing on paper, but you need to figure out the style. And ideally, you're doing things like looking at, you know, thinking about, okay, what is the sound of this? I don't actually know the sound, the music, the font, the design, all these elements, but also you don't necessarily know the way into your story. I mean, to take the example of the Operation Rambo trailer, that could have, and I think in one cut may have, started with Steve telling his story about being a fan that one day discovers that the star of his favorite movie is alive and well and living in New Zealand. So the part of the process of making these trailers and working with an editor is figuring out, okay, well, I've got this complicated thing. How do I structure this? And the one thing I learned from James is the phrase he would always use when we were mired in it is trust the process. And Raj used the word process a lot. And every editor has a different process. Mine's very architectural. Mine's get a prototype as quickly as possible and see if the bones work. James's was kind of the opposite. He'd try to get the first 30 seconds right. And even before that, he'd try to get the first opening right, and then move forward, and then move forward. And then if that didn't work, it'd start back, you know, and there's no right or wrong with that. It's really, other than it's a very iterative process, no matter what way you do it. So we had to figure out what we had to work with, which were, you know, these letters, these photos. Tom had photographed these letters. And the reason I'm telling you all of this as well is maybe as you're listening to me, maybe you can think of, knowing what I've told you about this story and hearing about these elements, you can think, how would I put that trailer together? And then I'll show it to you in a couple minutes here. The other thing that Tom had, being a photographer and having been passionate about it since he was a kid, he had these home movies of his family from the time that he was big enough to pick up the camera that his dad bought, to the time he was going off to university and making indulgent student films, to being on sets all over the world shooting these films, so high 8, and then using the same camera to photograph behind the scenes stuff, and then also stills. He had also arranged to have the English translation of the letters recorded by actors that he worked with on one of his shows. So that's, and obviously we're talking about somebody who has very specific things that he can access, but everybody in their own project will have these distinct. And I'm trying to blow through this as quickly as possible so that maybe we can get into some diagnostic work at the end here with those of you who are struggling with how you tell your story with the elements you have, and or the elements that you need to add to it, which in this case was music, voiceover. You saw in the King Loser trailer, it's basically 100% what was shot or existing archive or on-screen titles and nothing else. So there's trailers that go the entire opposite way. There's a beautiful funding trailer for Blood Simple, actually, the Coen brothers' first movie, where they went and just shot a that captured their vision, using no actors, but using just carefully framed shots that gave the idea. And for those of you that are looking at going down sort of a Netflix reenactment kind of road, that might be something that makes a lot of sense, is doing a small shoot where you get a lot of bang for your buck, or, you know, again, going down the Getty Images stock kind of road to find those things. But no matter where you go, you still have to, you know, do these things that Raj talked about in terms of finding the story and figuring out, does it resonate? And if you're a director working with your editor, this is where the editor-director relationship is very important, because they're your first audience. And they're going to be the one that's, if you're lucky, telling you the home truths. Because if you're not lucky, then you're going to put something out that's not as good as it could be. But the home truth may be that that moment that feels so emotional for you, where your interviewee, who's usually like this, kind of looks like that, doesn't actually work if you haven't spent an hour and a half with them in this. It's the impact for you as a filmmaker, in other words, is very different to the impact for somebody who's watching things for the first time. And the editor's job is to bridge that gap and tell the story, try to make it clear to somebody who hasn't been living in this for months or years of the development cycle, while still trying to be true to your vision and hopefully not Shanghai it, which is another way that editor relationships can go poorly. So hopefully, so I think ultimately we worked for 5 months on various versions of the trailer. And I will show you what we arrived at after a lot of work, and then speak sort of briefly as to how we got there. And then I think we only have like 19 minutes left, so duck directly into maybe a more free-ranging discussion, and maybe Raj can come back in for that as well. But let me go back into sharing mode here.
What do our loved ones leave behind after they die? Here's what my father left me. A mysterious collection of love letters and pictures tied up with string. A woman I didn't know, a woman who wasn't my mother.
Finally, I received your letter, warm and sweet as blood. I feel like you're sitting here beside me. You look into my eyes, you hold my hand. Why the letters and the words on paper if you read me, if you read my face so much better?
My father fled Poland in the spring of 1940 to Palestine, South Africa, Northern Rhodesia, and Canada.
We have to be together. Learn how to do it now. Longing is a wild creature, like an ocean, shoreless.
Those fragile memories traveled the world. The mystery woman of my parents' love triangle, hidden away in a false bottom suitcase.
Only one thought remains. It's an image engraved in my eye which won't disappear even after death. The way a murderer becomes captured in the victim's retina. That image is your face. And a yearning is reflected there, and a power which human will cannot restrain.
I grow up in my father's image, photo-obsessed and private. As my parents grew old, I was far away, making movies, traveling the world, always with a camera, collecting an archive of still and moving pictures for the film I never realized I needed to make. The film about my parents, about my distant father and his box of secrets, and the ghost that lived in our home.
My memories from this period of time, as I told you, are entirely blocked.
When my elderly mother finds those remnants of his first love, she attacks my 94-year-old father with a kitchen knife.
I can feel the strength in me, breath that empowers my chest. Not caring about the people, we beat the gods' records. The main game has not started yet. This is just the opening. We will play.
The letters are hidden again and forgotten. My parents die. Time moves on. And then one day I rediscover that box. Love letters from another time. Who was my father? The man before war. All I have are home movies. This mystery. And one last letter written to me at the end of his life for me to find.
Cool. So that took, yeah, when I say that took 5 months, obviously that wasn't 5 months every day, but it took a lot of gestation to get there. The first iteration of it was much shorter, much punchier, started on the knife story and really like a much more traditional trailer. And the tension through this whole project really was the conventional wisdom that you want to make a catchy, grabby trailer versus the specificity of Thomas's artistic vision, which was not about get in there, get out, take names and go home. It's about asking questions and getting lost in detail and wondering about things. And Thomas wonders a lot. He's a very deep thinker. And so then you have to get from that to, well, this story is important to you, Thomas. It's your dad. And there's thousands. There's so many documentaries in the world about people's father. So saying you have an important story to tell about your father or your mother or your sister is not something that has probably had cut through for 15, 20 years. And so it is really, how do you maintain the core of what's so important to this filmmaker and the pace and style of this? And we went down one spectacular dead end because the archive material that he has on film sets, those of you who are experienced in working in film sets will know that a lot of people who work in film are not very reserved or not very politically correct. And so we tried starting with a really whiz-bang opening of a lot of that kind of life to contrast to what was where Thomas wasn't, because part of the larger text of this is that Thomas will be traveling the world, trying to discover all these things. Meanwhile, the discoveries that he really wants to make are right there whenever he goes home with his dad, who he almost never talks to. And when he does talk, he doesn't know the right questions to ask. And so this was a lot of back and forth, a lot of hour-long discussions about on the phone, a lot of, what is this film really about for you? Get a 15-minute answer. Okay, so here's what resonates with me as the external thing. Here's what, this is not something that's going to happen in my life. I don't share the same worries about you. But what really stuck in my heart is this kind of like, and what I think is sort of the most universally relatable, is that people we love will die. And at that point, we have to deal with what's left. And that's ultimately where we found the end to the trailer. And it's obviously it's not a film for everybody. It's, I think, if you put it out there as a little video pitch, there will be people who will turn it off after 7 seconds. But it was also part of a Seed and Spark fundraising page. It wasn't really put out there as a click this trailer and tell the story. You'll see there's very little direct appeal in it. There's no explanation of what you're expected to do about it. There's no give us 50,000. But ultimately it was the cornerstone of a very successful crowdfunding campaign. It had a $40,000 goal. It reached $56,000. And so one of the things that came out of that, and this is something also in terms of if you're doing an archival documentary, especially, there were all these materials that I had to get set up in Avid of all of this material. And so now it's like, okay, great. We can actually like finish really cataloging this material and like really getting the meat of it picked off the bones so that you can start this next phase of development, which Thomas is currently in because he wants to shoot reconstructions and raise a lot more money. And so that means having the best of the archive combined with a lot of things that haven't been shot. So that's that development process. I go on a lot more, but I think I'd rather just open it up to discussion rather than take any more time.
Thank you, Doug. Thomas's film actually was pitched to Doc Edge as well, and you're quite right. The film reaches crowdfunding target very, very quickly, and it has been actually observed around the world by quite a number of people. So there have been people reaching out to Thomas across the world. I think the difference, I think what Thomas has through you, Doug, is a very lyrical teaser. It speaks to your heart. And the use of the music and the imagery and the ability to be able to hear Thomas's voice personalizes the entire experience. So it's almost like Thomas is there speaking to you. Thomas is telling you why he wants to tell the story, because ultimately
he literally recorded those voiceovers in his car. Just got in the mic there because you know, down in Napier, I wasn't like, oh, go over to Images and Sound and my friends will sort you or whatever, or Inside Track. You're just like, and I think that really adds to it. I think it's just him being very intimate with that, and yeah, it's something that you have to lean into. Whereas obviously some trailers you can lean out to, and you're like, whoa, this is overwhelming. This is coming at me. But I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think it's just, you know, if I was doing the Operation Rambo trailer, I certainly wouldn't have taken that approach. And so I think it is making sure that when you approach an editor, if you approach an editor, that you have the same sort of aesthetic interest that they resonate with what you're trying to do. You know, trailer, it's not a one editor fits all kind of situation, you know. And if they and part of it was that I could talk with him about Tarkovsky and Bresson and things like that, and I could talk about Errol Morris or whatever, and we knew what we were talking about. We were speaking the same language. It shortcuts so much, if you know, and that just really makes life easier. And I would say, and I know with Operation Rambo, when you guys were talking about editors, I'm like, well, I know somebody who's really into this kind of cinema, and that and that's so that's something I think super important.
I mean, one of the things that I would say as well is that the trailer or the teaser needs to go to the very essence of who you are and why you want to tell the story, because people really need to be able to invest in the fact that they're going to support you and your vision. So, you know, it's really important. If you're making a trailer, it's got nothing to do with your film, and someone says they're interested in you 3 months down the line, and they start seeing what you're doing, there's going to be huge problems. So you do need to be quite true to exactly who is the authentic or what is the authentic story that you're trying to tell.
Alex, one thing sorry, go ahead.
So I was curious to ask the both of you. Now, I know there are different ways in which to approach making a teaser. You could start with thinking about what your end is and move backwards. You can start thinking about the fundamental points that you're trying to make and try to craft it that way. Or you could start and think about the traditional 3-act structure, how to get people involved with it. I mean, do you have any thoughts that you want to share with the filmmakers today with regards to what you think would be a good way for people to start the process?
For me personally, the thing that's always cuts through, and I've been in situations where I didn't do this, and then I ended up doing it at the end. So the work was the same, regardless of. But I usually try these days to be very, very, very diligent at the very start. It's always that question. It's always like us, you know, try and figure out what is the question you want to leave your audience with, and the question will always be tied to your topic anyway. you know. So it's just a matter of just really nailing that, because once you nail that, you can, if you've already shot most of the documentary, you automatically know what you have that supports it versus what's missing. And the thing is that you can cut your teaser and then show it to somebody, and you kind of go, and the feedback that they might give you might make you go, okay, cool, I've asked the wrong question, you know. And that's kind of important too, is actually kind of going, okay, fine, I thought this is what I wanted to sell, but no one's interested in that. They're actually really interested in this other thing. You can go back and revise. But for me, it's always been trying to start out with a question, and that just immediately it tells you immediately what you don't have to look at versus what you do have to look at. So I always go from that perspective. That's assuming that you already know what's in your footage. But I mean, I'm sure Doug has a different approach.
Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, so when I came on this project, for instance, I got a lot of notes from Thomas about where to look in this giant cavalcade of footage, and he had things that he liked. But I mean, one thing regardless of the scale or the project that I cut on, there's always this idea of what somebody called once the lean forward moment, and it's the moment when you're sitting, you're watching something, and you lean forward, and that's always important, but it's very important in teasers and trailers, because hopefully that moment is resonating. And it's also important for you to have faith in that reaction, because no matter what you're cutting, the 100th time it doesn't land. And it also, you can run into the danger of over-egging that moment. And that's one thing I would be really cautious of, is that you can get to a point where you have a beautiful moment from somebody, and then you layer the sound effect, and then you layer the music, and then you jump cut twice into a closer frame, and then it feels cooked, because it is cooked, because you didn't trust the gold that you had there in the first place. So I usually try to get those moments, build select timelines, and then I just start thinking about, how do these puzzle pieces fit together, knowing that, you know, in the case of the Iggy and Love one, I can use voiceover to get anywhere, but, you know, what are the non-submersible moments, was I think Kubrick's phrase. Is like, what are these things? I tend to think less in acts and more in moments, and how you connect between those. And once you have those core moments, then it's just a matter of making them play nicely together.
Tell me, what do you? I know that with Iggy that you use some really beautiful music, and I'm just wondering, because some people may not have a lot of dialogue because they haven't done a lot of shooting at this point in time. How do the both of you treat music as part of a teaser? And the second part of that question is, what about graphics? I mean, the thing is that sometimes, as I was just saying, you don't have dialogue. So do you need to like have graphics to grab the attention of the viewer?
Do you want me to start with that? Yes. So on the music front, that was a lot of sharing Spotify playlists back and forth. The piano piece at the start is one that's much beloved by Tom. There's some Max Richter in there. There's some other stuff. It's copyright music that we can't use anywhere else, but it works in these contexts. In terms of graphics, that I do wish we had a designer on board, but that becomes a element. And when we became clear that we weren't going to use that tool of using cards on screen, and that we didn't need it, because the voiceover is actually such a personal appeal, and getting lost in the sort of dreamlike texture of these images overlapping each other. Whenever you tried to bring other text into it, and there were a couple cuts with that, it just didn't really work. So we just have that title card at the end. A designer would have done something nicer with it, but yeah, I think designers are important. I think the thing is, like, you realize what are the things that are missing from your vision. No filmmaker lands with a complete vision, and you're building a team of people who are helping you realize your vision for people who are going to give you money. And so you just have to be brutally honest about what's missing, what you are willing to sacrifice because you don't have the money, and what you're not willing to sacrifice because it's part of the vision, and figuring out how you choose between those two.
Yeah. Raj?
Yeah, I mean, building on what Doug says, yeah, I think that people kind of also, whenever I see text cards in teasers, I think that people kind of really sort of can underplay that a little bit much, because there's so much an editor can do and a team can do if you just pick the right font, if the words you put on those cards are beautifully written, and if they're edited, you know, with the right music, with a bit of sound design. You don't need elaborate graphics to tell your story. You just have to kind of be able to set your tone. I mean, you can set tone for so much with just white text on black cards if you have the right combination of size, font, design, everything else supporting it. So, you know, it's really good, I think, for filmmakers to kind of go, what can I do with what little I have, and how can I polish that to really express what I'm trying to get across? That's really important. And music and sound design plays a massive part of that. You know, in many ways, I feel like with a lot of teasers, if you can nail the sound, often the vision is kind of secondary, and likewise, you know, great images can kind of be undermined if you only have if you have a very bad sound mix or very choppy sound, or, you know, a poor transition to such like that. Music is vital to me, but I tend to sort of set my own tastes, and a good editor will really communicate with the director and kind of go, you know, what excites you musically about what you're trying to make, and, you know, and then basically balance it out with their experience of what's really usable. For my teasers, they were all cut to music first. I found the music, I cut the music first, then I laid everything else on top of it, because that's how I think. But it's different for everybody. Yeah.
Hey, what I am going to propose to everyone is, can you stick around just a little bit longer? Because I think that I'd like to get some of the filmmakers, if they've got questions, to be able to ask the questions now, so that we can get both Raj and Doug to answer. So please feel free to put up your hand, signal that you have a question, and we can take it away that way. Yes, Kim.
I just wanted to say that last piece that we looked at, Tom's work, was good, absolutely gorgeous. And I thought, wow, I mean, you know, for someone who didn't have a designer, well, the whole thing it seems to be designed so beautifully, and the way he used music and sound was just gorgeous. I mean, I was thinking that it deserves a, you know, it almost deserves a, you know, to be written, you know, and you know, to be a drama. I mean, it's that you know, it's almost unbelievable. The story is such a great story. What did you think?
What, me?
Yeah, in terms of.
I mean, look, if Tom gets funding, he's asked me to cut it, and I would love to cut it. I feel like it's a Tonga. I feel like it's a treasure, and I feel like he's got an incredible vision. But I mean, we're all filmmakers. We know how this goes. Yeah. We want to make things, and sometimes they happen, and sometimes life happens. And I kind of pushed for a little bit to be like, do you want to do the cheap version of this? Because we have the archive, we have the letters. We can make a version of it that's the real low budget version that doesn't have you going over to Poland and filming nice stuff. But that's not his vision. And, you know, that's the thing, is ultimately, like, it wouldn't have got this far without his vision. And that's what people will be buying in the end. So fingers crossed that one of these years we'll be seeing it at the Dock Edge.
Yeah, Tom's film is actually in development with the New Zealand Film Commission now. Great. So, you know, obviously it speaks volumes. You know exactly what you're going to get out of it.
Yeah, fantastic. Very worthy. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Anyone else?
If anyone has any diagnostic questions of trouble they're having, I'd love to hear them as well, or just kind of talk through anything with their projects.
Hello, I'm Susan.
Hello.
Thank you so much. Again, I got so much out of this workshop. My question is about length of a trailer, which I kind of know the answer to, perhaps, in many ways. You know, if it's too long, it's going to feel too long. It depends on your content. But is there a length that you think is too long, a length that you think is too short? Is it just relative to what you have?
Can I jump in that for Dock Edge Pitch? You have a
I know
total
we
of
for this.
you have a total of 7 minutes.
Yeah.
And in
Yeah,
7
yeah.
minutes, you get the opportunity to speak and to do a trailer. A lot of people work on a 3-minute trailer, but I mean, based on the needs of Doc Edge. But from Doug and Raj's point of view, what would make an ideal length for a teaser trailer?
Speaking to the Rambo trailer that we had did for Doc Edge, that was quite a long trailer. I mean, that used up 5 of our 7 minutes, but our thinking was that Steve was going to have to talk anyway. And so we're like, well, he's, you know, we already have all the stuff of him talking, saying out loud what we're going to talk about anyway. So we just threw that into the actual trailer. But I mean, even at the time, we were kind of going, man, this is a little bit long. But you know, we had that gap to use. I've always found personally, it's like, you know, whenever we're pitching to studios or to sales agents and distributors and stuff like that, and we don't have an actual proper trailer to show, which is usually 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, anything longer than 5, and you're just kind of you're sort of approaching that event horizon where people just don't care anymore. The really short trailers, like 2 or 3 minutes, are a really amazing discipline anyway, because they really force you to really think about what you're trying to get across, you know. And obviously, as you can tell, my perspective is, even though I'm a filmmaker, I've had to think a lot like a salesperson, and so I'm always trying to jump between the two roles of, you know, I really want to say things, but I also have to, like, you know, worry about this really cynical person I'm going to meet who doesn't care, and how do I make them care in 2 minutes, you know? So that's always been my challenge personally.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, my answer is, you're already asking people to spend money, and you're also asking them to spend time in a world where we have a super saturated attention economy. There's an argument that you might want to have multiple trailers depending on your venue, because I mean, we've just used the same one as the pitch trailer and then as the fundraising for Iggy, but it's not really a standalone fundraising thing if you were going to put out there, in the same way that King Loser one tells you everything you need to know. It's like, we've got this stuff. This is what we need the money for. Give it to us. You know, that's a clear in and out pitch in 3.5 minutes. Whereas if you're doing your piece as an integrated pitch of a larger thing, then you're also thinking about the whole architecture of what you're saying, what you need to show. And in that case, it's maybe I have amazing actuality, and I'm going to show you a single scene because that scene's really works. So it's really, in terms, I think, of the Doc Edge pitch, it's not just this trailer is an item that floats unto itself. It's the larger fabric of what you're selling. From a cost efficiency perspective, ideally, you'll probably just want to do it once. But, you know, if you're making one item, it's not necessarily ideal for everything. But just don't waste people's time. I watched one recently that was 8 minutes and started with the filmmaker saying, "Oh, hi, I'm just walking down to the beach." And I was just like... And this was actually something I'd already funded, and I hadn't watched the trailer. I just really liked it. And then when I started watching it, I'm like, if I hadn't been pre-sold on this, I would not. Because if you're wasting my time in the teaser, what are you going to do with me in the feature?
Yeah, good point. Fair point. Thank you.
Just to add to Doug's point, and to reiterate it, for Operation Rambo, like we're in development for a feature. I mean, we have a short and such, but I mean, we already have 12 different trailers for different durations for different occasions. So it's the more you do, the more it really gets you thinking about your movie as well. So it's good practice.
It's true. I don't want to take up too much more time. I'd like other people to have it in, but I've already got 2. I've got a longer one and then a shorter one. My sister is my executive producer, and she's brilliant for getting me out of my creative ass. So she's like, "No, I don't get it. Like, let's go here." So yeah, and it does. It has helped.
One tip that I have for if you're having trouble, if you can watch people watching your trailer, that will tell you immediately when they're bored, even if they're too nice to tell you.
That's a good tip. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to ask a question or make a comment?
I have a question.
Yes.
What if there's no leading question? What if we're just going and following people around and getting to know their lives, for example. What would your advice be then for a teaser?
Do you want me to run with
Well,
that,
now it's a
Raj?
question, isn't it? Well, I mean, like I think that there's a difference between what you're going to be making versus what you're telling people you're making. I think there is a difference because movies evolve. People who fund movies know movies evolve, but I think it's more of an analyst question, really, in terms of I mean, 'cause I think you might have dealt with that in the past with Doc Edge, haven't you?
Well, it's an observational documentary question, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what I would say is the question is, why do I want to spend time watching these people when I can watch anybody?
Mm.
That's the leading question. Is like, why are these people interesting? Why, of all the people in the world, should I care about watching these people? And observational documentary is great. And I mean, there's certainly like, I would encourage you to look at trailers to observational documentaries if you're struggling with that, whether it's, American Movie or Quest or I never actually looked at Wiseman trailers, come to think, but it's certainly a genre that's really well explored. But all you need to have happen at the end of that trailer is for somebody to say, yeah, I do want to hang out with these people. I want to see what happens in their lives.
Yeah. Often in the making
Sorry, Raj.
documentary.
Okay.
Sorry, am I? Oh, I was just saying that,
on my screen.
Okay. Yeah, I was just saying that if you haven't shot anything, the question might be the question you might be communicating is why you want to make this documentary. What's interesting about it to you? Because at least that's something authentic that you can build from.
Yes, and I would echo everything that Doug and Raj has said. I think it's really important to ask yourself, why do you want to make the documentary? And to be able to voice that is perhaps answering the question as to what is the question.
Mm.
And I think that you do need to be able to tell people why they should take the time to go with you on that journey. What is it that they're going to find from going on that journey? And it may be that different people have got different expectations, or certainly they might find that they react differently to the story, but that doesn't matter because you're inviting them on a journey. Why are you inviting them on that journey? What is it that you want them to experience? I think that's really important.
Just something related to that too. Democracy is not consensus. It's just like different people will watch different trailers and have different opinions. I know people who think that the second trailer we did for Iggy was way better, and that we, left off all this great stuff. They're mostly Tom's friends who like seeing their faces, but still, as you go through this process, it's really about honing it. It's like, of all the infinite films that can be made from almost any footage, it's about finding out what is your film and how do you make people want to see that.
And certainly, I think that from a point of view of documentaries, European broadcasters and funders and sales agents love observational documentaries. They love slow shots where you can look at perhaps a tree and it takes 40 seconds, 45 seconds to go past the tree. But there's something in that shot that's so beautiful that when you watch it, you feel compelled that you feel like you just need to keep watching it. So, I think that you need to find those shots as well when you're doing that type of trailer, because people get a sense of what it is that you're trying to do. I think that we're coming to the end of this, but I wanted to be able to play you a trailer from last year. And this trailer is called I Thought Jesus Was Korean. It went to Darker Doc Lab, it went to Doc Edge, it recently went to AIDC, and at the end of the pitch, there were 32 invitations to have a meeting from 32 decision makers wanting to have a meeting with this particular filmmaker because of her pitch. So I'm going to try to screen share. Maybe ask the question first, because I'm having a little bit of a problem with the sound.
Yeah. So we have Kylie here. She asks, how important is it to make it super polished? I have short Zoom interviews that I haven't shot in the actual interviews yet. Is it okay to put them in? How important is it to make it look like I already have shot the entire film when I haven't?
I think obviously you're asking for money, so you haven't shot the whole film. The one thing that bothers me about the King Loser trailer is the sound mix isn't great, but also they're asking for money for the sound mix. So, you know, you kind of give it credit for that. I think with something like Zoom interviews, for instance, it's really hard to know, but I'd say it just depends on how important it is what they say in that, and that adds to it. If seeing that person talk is compelling, then yes. If it's something that you don't feel like will translate unless they're interviewed in a beautiful situation, then it's probably going to do more harm than good, would be my gut, without having seen the interviews or knowing more about the story.
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that I mean, if you're doing Zoom interviews, you're dealing with two components, visual and sound. If it's not important to hold on their visual for a very long time, cut away to some B-roll or some stock images and just let the audio of their interview carry that, because what they're saying is going to be more important than how they look when they're saying it. So yeah, don't be afraid don't be afraid of your Zoom interviews. There's potentially gold in there. And if it's all kind of jerky and looks really boring, then just cover it up with Getty stock images and away you go. And that's enough.
There's feature films that use Zoom interviews regularly these days. So
yeah.
All right.
It's New York City, 1982. Over 4,000 brides and grooms flood the streets of Manhattan as they make their way into Madison Square Garden. Just days before they lined a room at the New Yorker Hotel, men on one side, women on the other, a Korean man pointing his finger, matching these couples to be. And having a shared language wasn't important. Their commitment was. Commitment to something bigger than themselves. Commitment to this man known as Sun Myung Moon. The next step? To birth a generation born without sin. The generation to bring salvation to humanity. Which is exactly how I'm standing here today. So yeah, didn't really complete that mission. Kia ora, hello, I'm Eleanor. I'm the director of I Thought Jesus Was Korean, a theatrical feature documentary supported by the New Zealand Film Commission.
What do you think, Eleanor?
When I was a little girl, I dreamed of getting married, just like my parents. But for some reason, I kept my dream a secret. We all did.
It's really different to New Zealand culture as well. Most people don't wake up at 7 a.m. to bow to photos.
I would never be straight up like, oh yeah, that's, you know, the Messiah.
Wine being followed by a moon shadow, moon shadow, moon shadow.
In September 2012, the man I'd believed to be Jesus died.
Reverend Moon led an influential and controversial life up until his last days. He was 92 years old.
3 years later, I filmed a short documentary with the kids I grew up with. The second generation born into this all.
And if you know the Korean one.
I have not seen this thing in years.
I found it in my mum's church cover.
Even after all these years, it feels like this story still hasn't been told. What if everything you knew to be true about who you were and why you were born was a lie?
Followed by a moon shadow, moon shadow, moon shadow.
In particular, Dr. Hoff, Young Heart
is turned between good and evil. If a nation population become numb to evil, evil will take over.
Particular problem for children who are deprived of normal developmental activities.
Some stories, they follow you like a shadow.
That was a very personal documentary. It's a little bit like Tom's one. It's the filmmaker wanting to tell her story. She incorporated part of her pitch She incorporated some videos that she made while she was a student. It has now got significant interest overseas. That was her first ever live pitch that she did when she showed this. She's only pitched it 3 times before. But you know, it's something that's creating a lot of interest, and the Film Commission is very excited about this film. It's just an example of another way in which the film has been put together as a pitch. I think that what it is that it gives you a sense of what the story is, and it is compelling, and she's charismatic, and that's part of what we're going to talk about tomorrow when you have a workshop. It's about how to present and how to be charismatic and how to make people want to support you. Yeah, you know, it's for me, it was a very it was a pitch that made you wanted to support her. So anyway, on that note, has anyone got any other matters that any other things that you would like to raise?
Alex, I'm gonna have to bail. I've got another appointment coming up very shortly. But thank you very much for your time and for having me. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's been
Great.
absolutely amazing to have you guys as part of this. You know, I'm sure everyone agrees that they got quite a lot out of this session. And tomorrow we will spend some time and talk about the next part of it. So thank you so much again.
Awesome. Thank you.
And, you know, look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow. We'll cover some of the other topics then. Everyone, thank you, Doug. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Raj.